Welcome back to another video with Liferay. Today, we're going to be going over performance tuning with DXP Cloud. Our learning objectives for this video include understanding the clustering options for Liferay DXP and how to set up clustering in DXP Cloud, learning how to adjust JVM settings to tune Liferay DXP performance, understanding the different tools available for monitoring your DXP Cloud project, and developing accurate expectations for your project's performance. The first thing we want to do when doing performance testing on Liferay DXP Cloud is notifying the DXP Cloud team. One thing to keep in mind is before we need to do any DXP Cloud performance testing, we need to give the Liferay team a 48-hour advance notice. So this is all before performance tuning starts. And the reason for this is because performance tuning is going to spike our service usage and might cause concern if the team is not notified. Going into the actual performance testing, some things we want to keep in mind are that clustering is available. So what is Liferay clustering? So clustering for DXP in general has two different kinds of clustering configured. We have the first one, which is sticky sessions. This is a lightweight load balancing technique, and it allows users without sessions to be directed to the app server with the lowest load. From then on, they'll stay assigned to that server until their session is removed. The second one is session replication. With session replication, the app server copies the session state from a primary app server to a secondary app server. Keep in mind, though, that there is a large performance overhead for both the app server and the network when session replication is enabled. Another thing we want to keep in mind is network configuration. So both in-memory caching and cluster link need to communicate with other nodes. Typically, with an on-premise setup, we could use multicast or unicast, but for DXP Cloud, only unicast is enabled. In order to use clustering in DXP Cloud, make sure to make the following changes in the Liferay lcp.json file. We want to set lcp project cluster enabled to true, as we can see here in this image. And we want to increase the scale to the desired number of nodes in your cluster. Enabling clustering automatically copies these files from the Liferay home folder. That's going to be the portal CLU properties file and the unicast XML file. These files contain the configuration needed to run Liferay DXP in a cluster. Once these are enabled, we'll go ahead and verify that clustering is working. And we can do this by checking the logs for the accepted view message and JGroups receiver messages. Liferay DXP Cloud has this concept of auto-scaling for high availability. This is only available in the production environment. And this can also be enabled from the lcp.json file or the scale tab of the Liferay service. One thing to keep in mind when autoscaling is enabled is that instances must be manually downscaled after autoscaling adds additional instances. So what autoscaling does is allow us to add instances as our Liferay user base grows. So once we get to a certain point that we get to set, we'll go ahead and add another instance to our Liferay cluster. The next thing that we want to go over is tuning our JVM settings. So we can go ahead and do some Java virtual machine tuning. So some of the adjustments that we want to make to improve performance include things like adjusting the garbage collector. We want to make sure to set the appropriate garbage collector settings so that we can help to improve responsiveness of the Liferay DXP deployment. The second one will be the code cache. Too small of a code cache can reduce performance, so we want to make sure to tune that as well. The third step is going to be adjusting the Java memory heap. Typically, we want to do a little bit more sophisticated tuning than setting min and max memory. So be sure to check your requirements and tune accordingly. A couple of points to keep in mind for JVM tuning within the DXP Cloud. The DXP Cloud team actually configures the JVM initially, but we should make sure that we do some additional changes according to our business requirements and performance requirements so that we can fine-tune the performance. Next, we want to get into system monitoring and evaluating performance. So DXP Cloud actually comes pre-built with UI monitoring. Inside of the monitoring tab, inside of the web console, we can track a service's metrics for CPU. That's going to be measured in percentage. So memory, that's going to be measured in kilobytes, megabytes, and gigabytes, etc. And our transfer speeds. That's also going to be measured in kilobytes, megabytes, and gigabytes. Liferay is also partnered with Dynatrace and comes pre-installed with the Dynatrace integration. The production environment typically comes with Dynatrace integration out of the box, but we need to enable it in the lcp.json file for the DXP service. The Advanced tab of the monitoring section in the DXP Cloud web console contains the Dynatrace dashboard. This dashboard provides a more detailed look at your services in the production environment. And we can also add Dynatrace to other environments in case we want those monitored as well. Any additional add-ons must be purchased from DXP Cloud. If we want to do further evaluation of performance with third-party tools, these tools might include things like the Grinder, which is used by Liferay to determine Liferay DXP 7.2's optimal performance numbers. And Liferay actually utilizes the Grinder load testing tool and its distributed load injectors to find a baseline of performance. Other tools might include things like JMeter or AppLoader that you or your team might already be familiar with. Expectations for Liferay DXP Cloud. We want to make sure that we're setting performance expectations before performance tuning. So for example, how many users do we need? Let's go ahead and look at our total users and the number of concurrent users that are on at the same time. We want to make sure that we're looking at how we're using Liferay DXP. Is this going to be an infrastructure portal, a CMS, or a content management system, or a collaboration network? What kind of transaction times are we expecting for various tasks that your users will perform? And our last question might be finding the peaks for a particular hour and for particular seasons. For example, if we have a portal that's serving a school, are we going to have different kinds of seasonal user counts depending on what season we're in? We want to plan our performance tests around the peaks and not the average. Expectations for a single instance of Liferay DXP. Liferay has already done performance testing with Liferay DXP 7.2 to provide baseline performance expectations. Some of these expectations are things like Liferay can handle at least 1 million total users, up to 47,000 concurrent users logging in, which means login times of about 312 milliseconds. This is important to keep in mind, especially for use as an infrastructure portal. 26,000 concurrent users accessing files from at least 2 million documents in the database. That's important if we're using our Liferay instance as a CMS. 15,000 concurrent users forming comments or threads with an average transaction time of 800 milliseconds. That's going to be important if we're using Liferay as a collaboration network. One thing to keep in mind with Liferay DXP is that it actually scales linearly. With DXP Cloud, your DXP instance scales in a linear way as additional instances are added. What this means is that doubling our number of instances should double the number of supported users that can perform a particular task with the same transaction time. This makes it easier to calculate how many instances you need based on your expected user base. Auto-scaling provides an automatic way of doing this as more users access your platform. That does it for this video. We'll see you in the next one.